that we've given him today. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. David Pilgrim to Kendall College. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to go up to Ferris and see the Jim Crow Museum, I wholeheartedly recommend that you do that. You will find that experience enlightening, moving, and quite a bit humbling. If you can go there and visit that exhibition and not be moved in some way, you need to check your mental health status, because it is a significant exhibition. Dr. Pilgrim has graciously come down. He's a very busy guy. He was in Detroit recently, last night I think, on tape this morning, and up at 5 o'clock. So without further ado, Dr. David Pilgrim.
Well, I am going to, where's the other microphone? Are they, well, I won't use it. I'll just stand right here. They did have a handheld one. Did I throw it away? Yeah, there we go. In case I want to move around, I have this and this. So now we're all good to go. And you've been wonderful. I don't know what they're paying you here, but it's not enough. No, I'm serious. Did Rosen leave? Oh, okay. All right, fine. All right, I'm going to start real quick. This is a longer presentation. I'm trying to do it really, really fast because I've been told that at a certain hour, you just get up and leave no matter what I'm saying. So I'm going to try to get as much of it in as I can, but I want to start with a lie. When I was a little boy down in Mobile, Alabama, people used to sit out in front of, this is not the lie, I'll get to the lie. People used to sit out in front of old stores and drink lemonade. You bought lemonade like right out of the pitcher. They bring it out and charge a nickel, whatever. And these old men would sit out there, and I would sit and listen to them. And one time they told me this story, which was a lie. The story was, and like all lies, a little bit of elements of truth. The story was that this one black fella had been picking pecans. Everybody know what a pecan is? It's not a pecan, it's a pecan. And they'd been out picking pecans, and he got paid by the bushel. And he did not like what he was getting paid, so he complained to his boss man, who was a white American, and they got into a big argument, and he ended up storming off and taking with him the other two people who worked there picking pecans. And later that night, someone came by his house, knocked on his door and said, "You need to get the hell out of this town." And he's like, "Why?" He's like, "Because you hit a white man." It's like, "What the hell are you talking about? I had an argument with Bob, but I didn't hit him." It's like, no, get out of town. He jumps in his old jalopy, driving down Telegraph Road, trying to get out of Mobile to save his life, gets partway down Telegraph Road, looks behind him and sees tons of cars coming at him with angry people screaming. His car stops. He jumps out of his car, runs across what you up here would call a landfill. Down south, we call them a dump. Runs across the dump and escapes. And the people were so angry. Here comes the lie. The people were so angry that he got away that they lynched his car. Now, that's stupid. And when I was a little boy, that scared the shit out of me. Excuse my language. That scared me. I was terrified. They lynched a car. So now when I travel around the U.S., I see people lynching chairs. And I think to myself, man, those old men, you see where I'm going with this? Okay, now does everybody get the whole lynching chair thing? Because Mr. Clint Eastwood was at the Republican convention and was arguing with a chair, which had a hypothetical President Obama in it. And so this has become kind of a symbolic way of expressing certain ideas about the president. Please come to the museum. Today was a good day for the museum. Henry Gates. How many of you heard of Henry Gates? Raise your hands. Good. Just the people in their 40s. All right, Henry Gates. How many of you remember the guy who tried, the Harvard professor who tried, it's terrible, he's got to be known like this, the Harvard professor who got arrested for trying to get in his own home. And it led to that professor, the police who arrested him, and the President of the United States having a beer summit. Anybody remember that? Okay, anyway, that was the guy. He does a PBS special. I thought it was so cool he was in the museum. Come to the museum. Our job is to get people to talk openly and honestly about race, but also sex and gender and homophobia and any number of other topics. If I had my druthers, I wouldn't put any Klan stuff in there at all. What we're trying to do with the museum is to use everyday objects, not objects that are specific to a right-wing fascist group like the Klan, But the reality is this: you cannot tell the story of American race relations without telling some story about the Klan. So we have some of that in there. But most of the objects, we have over 9,000 objects. And most of those objects have nothing to do with some Klan group. They are everyday objects: ashtrays, toys, games, sheet music, postcards, any object you can think of. And it's those objects serving as propaganda. People from the Grand Rapids Public Museum came up, and I'm good friends with a lot of them. And when they look at the way I've done this museum, they want to throw a hissy fit. Because if you go into Grand Rapids Public Museum or any large museum, you'll notice a lot of huge didactic panels and then one or two objects. Have you noticed that? In our museum, it's the opposite. And we do it for a reason. The reason is this: I want people to know how omnipresent these objects were, how they pervaded our society. And my philosophy of museum or displaying is this: either you show 1,000 of something or you show one. And so what we decided to do was to go the thousands route, so that a person gets the sense standing in front of that, my goodness gracious, these things were everywhere. And how many of you have seen a lawn jockey? Well, actually, I'm not getting the same. Oh, there. I see. I got it figured out now. It's modern technology. How many of you have seen a lawn jockey? You know what a lawn jockey is? All right. How many of you have someone in your neighborhood with a lawn jockey? Okay. Do you know their work schedule? God will forgive you if you steal that lawn jockey and donate it to the Jim Crow Museum. This is a tough crowd, man. I mean, I've spoken to conservative crowds that were like more. Anyway, when you come to the museum, one of the things we do is you learn the history of objects and their significance. And by the way, if you look over in the corner, you'll notice that has on a Michigan State University thing. It would be better if it had University of Michigan clothes on, but I'm an Ohio State guy, in case you're wondering. All right. What? All right, so one of the good things about the new museum is that we're able to not just tell the stories of Jim Crow, but to also talk about the African-American response to it. And so we can talk about great thinkers like James Baldwin, W.B. Du Bois, and others. And I tell you, it's a lot easier to reach in my back pocket and take money out to buy these objects than it was to buy the stuff that I spent 40 years buying. We have a small civil rights section. One of the reasons I went to DTE was because I wanted to do a training session for their employees. The other reason was to continue our relationship with DTE, because I would like to expand the outside of the museum and have a much larger civil rights section. And DTE was the one corporation in this country, because we went all this country. They were the one corporation that decided to take a chance. I think with a lot of major corporations, they were afraid if they were the lead giver, they'd be the only giver. And when you see the words Jim Crow Museum, you're not sure what that means. You're not sure if it's a shrine to racism. You're not sure if it's an anti-racist thing. You're not sure. And they were willing to take the chance. So outside, we'll have a much larger civil rights section. This is presumably in the next year or so. But one of the things we have already, we have one of the ink pens that President Lyndon Baines Johnson used to sign the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The 1964 Civil Rights Act was the most comprehensive civil rights act in United States history. And what the presidents do, they write like a couple letters, then they take another pen and I got that for $20 off eBay from someone who appropriated it from the White House. If you look at this right here, not only do we talk about the past, Jim Crow was a period between the 1860s and the 1870s and the 1960s. It was a period where America had a racial hierarchy. It was supported by violence on the one end, extreme violence. And that's why when you come to the Jim Crow Museum, you'll find a lynching tree, an actual recreated tree in the museum. But it was also supported by everyday objects, as I said before, ashtrays and other things that caricatured African Americans and made them look like inferiors. But not all of that disappeared. And hear me when I say this, and I want to be careful and concise and clear. America has never been more democratic than it is today. It has never been more egalitarian than it is right now, but we still have challenges. And so, each time there is a race-based, ethnic-based, gender-based, sexual orientation-based national discussion, objects are produced. And these objects both reflect current attitudes and shape future attitudes. So, for example, when Don Imus refers to the, was it Rutgers? Refers to the Rutgers women's basketball team as nappy-headed hoes, within a week, there are pillows, like I'm Southern, P-I-L-L-O-W, pillows created. There are postcards created, games created with that on it. Any race-based, nationally, when we as a society start debating immigration, objects come out. These are all brand new. That's a relatively large shelf in the museum. If you see that T-shirt right here, you see that one right there? That T-shirt says, and you'll see it says any white guy in 2012. Right? That's obviously a new piece. The piece is over to the far, my right from right here. Those are all old images that have been reproduced on new things like mouse pads and the like. I challenge you to do this. Go to eBay, go to Yahoo, go to any internet auction house and type in any bad word about any group of people and pull up the objects that are being sold. Again, that does not mean we are not more democratic than the past. Doesn't mean we haven't made progress as a nation. But what it means is some of those ideas have morphed into the present. John McDonnell is not here. So Rosen shows up for 5 minutes. John doesn't show up. What the hell is going on down here? It must be me. That hurts me on the inside. That's what I was saying. Okay. John McDonnell, I went to him, and I said to him what my granddad used to say to me. And I'll give you that part. But the first thing I said to him was, I need a mural. Call it the cloud of witnesses in the museum. And these would be people that, they didn't die during the Civil Rights Movement. They were killed during the Civil Rights Movement. And their deaths had a tremendous impact on the movement. And it's like, well, who do you want up there? I said, well, I have a couple ideas. It's like, well, do you want them facing the left or the right? I said, listen, John, there are a cloud of witnesses. And he's going back, well, I need you to tell me. I was like, this is what my granddad used to say. Do it any way you want to do it, and do it right. And he did it right. And you're just seeing like half of that there. But these are blacks and whites who were killed during the Civil Rights Movement. And so, like the white woman there, Viola Liuzzo, how many of you heard of her? Out of Detroit, who gave her life during the Civil Rights Movement. Okay? Her daughter sent me an email talking about how proud she was that she was up there. And I'll show you a picture that's really cool. You know who that is? That is Malak Shabazz. When Malcolm X was killed, on the day he was killed, his wife, Betty Shabazz, was pregnant with twins. This is one of those twins. And years later, she comes to the metropolis of Big Rapids. That's a joke, okay? She comes to Big Rapids, Michigan, and sits under the mural that has a rendition of her father. And I said to her, because John wasn't there, I said to her, John McDonnell's not here. And when he painted this, I'm not trying to influence the answer to the question I'm getting ready to give you, but when he painted this, I cried when I looked at it because it was what was in my head, or as we say in Alabama, my head. It was what was in there. The whole museum was in there, but that mural was in there. And I says, but I got to ask you, when you look, and you've seen many pictures of your father in magazines and books and whatever else, I said, what do you think of this? And she says, if my mother, Betty Shabazz, was here, she would have joined you in crying. And I thought, what? If you're an artist, you take a chance when you paint a famous person. Does that make sense? And to have the child of that person say to you that it meant that much to them, that's, I don't want to say it's better than silver and gold, but it's currency. You follow me? We have traveling exhibits. You've had a couple of them here at Kendall. So we don't have to go over that much, but I would like, and I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, I'm just proud of our university, proud of all the people that's worked. Give you one quick thing about the traveling exhibits. I never knew this before I went to Hartford, Connecticut. Mark Twain and Harriet Beecher Stowe lived like across the street from each other. And she was probably 15, 20 years his senior, but they were good friends. Well, his home and the property that abuts it have been turned into a museum. Her home and the property that abuts it have been turned into a museum. So at one of the museums, they had our Hateful Things exhibit, which was here. And then at another one, they had the Them exhibit. So we had two Ferris exhibits at the Mark Twain House and the Harriet Beecher Stowe. I was like, this is awesome. And they brought in people from all across the country to do what we try to do every day up there, which is have an honest discussion about race. Everywhere I go, there's someone in a crowd that says, if you would just stop talking about race, racism would go away. And that doesn't even make stupid sense. The reality is we talk about race all the time. We talk about it in the bathrooms, corridors, kitchen tables, but we don't often talk about it in places where our ideas can be challenged. And we've created a place where that can happen. That is safe but uncomfortable. Safe but uncomfortable. So one word to summarize all the pieces: propaganda. I grew up thinking propaganda was just grainy old film and leaflets. Some of you remember like 67, like the old leaf people hand you out. I didn't think of a bank as propaganda. I thought you got propaganda when you went inside Fifth Third or First National or whatever. That's an let that go. Take that out of the tape. I may be asking them for money. All right. The point is I didn't think of postcards as propaganda, some of these other, but they are propaganda. Disseminated with the express purpose of shaping ideas about some group. So, how many of you play the piano? Anybody play the piano? You know what sheet music is, right? So you can imagine if you have sheet music and your family is behind you and you lay out the sheet music and you're singing together. Now think back before the computers and before TVs and before radios even. Well, not before radios, but a long time ago. And people would stand around, and it was this family-building, bonding experience. But they were singing all coons look alike to me. That's propaganda. I'll tell you something you may or may not know. You know the game where you go to a carnival or a circus, and you throw and you hit the target, and the person falls down into the water? We all know that game? What you might not know is that in the late 1800s, people went to circuses, carnivals, resorts. They threw at actual black people whose heads were cut out. Not the heads weren't cut out. The banners had a slit in them. A person would stick their head in there. People would throw at actual people. If you go to our website, which I hope you do, last month's question of the month dealt with that whole idea, because there'd be these newspapers account of Ty Cobb, who, by the way, was about as racist as you could be, who loved to go to those carnivals to throw at the black people's faces. Eventually, real people were replaced by wooden people or plastic people or some other thing. And the violence became more symbolic. If you were to come to the museum, one of the things we do, this is an 1896 print. One of the things we do in the museum is I ask you, when you see this, what is it you see? If we had enough time, I would do that exercise in here. What is it you see? Because what do we associate nakedness with in this culture? Don't say fun. What is it what? Vulnerability, what else? Sex, what else? Lack of modesty, lack of civilization, lack of culture, okay? We make moral judgments. They look, forgive the language, they're presented as a litter, not as separate children with their own identities. I mean, we would go through all this stuff. How many of you know Agatha Christie, the writer? Okay. On the cover of this book, and that's from an old poem, she's lynching a gollywog, which is, you know, I'm in a debate constantly with people in Ireland, in England, in Australia, about whether or not gollywogs are racist or not. And first of all, about the museum, an object does not have to be racist to be in the museum. It just has to be an object that lets us talk about race relations, and racism. Now, if you're asking me personally, what do I think? Yeah, I think gollywogs are a racist depiction, but that's just me. So our goal is to get people to talk honestly and openly. to get them to listen honestly, to get them to listen openly. So what are some of the lessons I've learned? Well, one thing is these things are not confined to the past. That's one of the misconceptions that people have. When they come into the museum, and part of that's my fault, I never should have named that thing the Jim Crow Museum. Because what that makes people think is that it's only dealing with topics, not just objects, but topics confined to that era. The reality is, I should have just called it, I don't know what the hell I should have called it, but I should have called it something else, okay? The reality is these are not just confined to the past. That old images show up on new things, and the ideas behind some of the old images morph into the present. I got a phone call from, I think it was Warren Pierce from WJR several months back, and he was like, so what do you think about these Adidas shoes? We've talked to a bunch of experts, and they say that it's all about slavery. And I'd seen the image, and I was like, well, you know what, that might be right, but I think it's wrong. I think it's a bad thing that's going on, but what I think is those images, those shoes were marketed to promote prison culture, thug culture, the celebration of criminal culture. That's also bad, but that's a different bad. Adidas eventually backed up. You know, one of the things that's amazing, some of you are going to end up in advertising. Don't stop being a sane person just because you got a job. Don't lose your common sense just because you're happy to be there. I have seen so many instances, not just in the past, but in the present, where someone gets a job, they sit at a table and they think, that's a good idea. Be the person at the table that raises their hand and says, I respectfully disagree. And there's still the legacy of Jim Crow. Now we have people that talking about seceding from the Union, pointing fingers in faces when you get off airplanes, yelling you lie during a speech, painting the president as the Antichrist, as Hitler, as a monkey, as everybody. Why shouldn't it just be okay to say I disagree with your policies? Are you following me? We disagree. That doesn't make you the Antichrist. How arrogant is that? New objects, old ideas. This is a target. Based on the Trayvon Martin tragedy. I mean, when we get done making targets and shooting them, because that's safe space in my backyard. There's no one around. I can shoot whatever I want to shoot in my backyard. I'm free to express any prejudice I have at what I shoot. David Pilgrim's not there asking me, what does that mean? I'm free. But when we get done doing that, that was someone that died. Your age. So we keep running in place. This idea that there's some real Americans and there's fake Americans. And one of the most bizarre ideas in the history of the world, and I'm not sure what year President Obama was born, I think it was like 1961, was that right? That his mother, a white woman who had conceived with a black African in Hawaii, had this diabolical plot to change his birth, do all kind of weird stuff with birth certificate so that one day he could become president of the United States. That is the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. She'd have to be Nostradamus quadrupled. You understand what I'm saying? That she actually set into place a series of events to qualify her son to be president of the United States. Who thought a brown person could be president of the United States in 1961? It's just crazy. What I say looking at this sign to my left, or left this way, is to the adults of America, carry your own signs. That picture over there is actually taken off of a T-shirt, but I wanted you to see the real picture. You know, someone was saying to me, oh, well, you know, President Bush was often referred to as a simian. I was like, well, that's wrong to do that. And they're like, well, how is that different from when President Obama? It's like, it is different. When President, go back and look at the transcripts, go back and read it. People were insulting his intelligence. It was wrong to do that. They were saying he's dumb as a what? A monkey. In the case of President Obama, what they're saying is, we're not sure he's a human. That's different. So growing up, this is what I heard so much. And this is from Martin. If you have no time to do anything else that I suggest, do this one thing. Read Letter from Birmingham Jail. And that man wrote that letter, in jail on the backs of envelopes and toilet tissue and stuff, and put it all together and created what might be the most powerful public letter ever written by an American. And in there is all these nice, pithy, profound statements. And this is one I heard all the time as a child, and it was like just became a slogan to me. Because as I traveled the country looking at anti-black stuff to build a Jim Crow museum, I saw things that put poor whites down and gays, and especially women and recent immigrants to this country. But I didn't collect that because that's not what I was doing. And I started hearing this criticism constantly, especially as I started traveling more nationally. People would say you are against oppression and subjugation, but all you do is build a Jim Crow museum. It's like, damn, I can't build everything. This is what I'm doing. It's like, no, you need a better answer than that. And I started looking at other stuff. And so I started collecting things like this from Walmart. It's 1682. Why is that significant? Because that means it's economically accessible to most Americans. And what do you think people do when they put on a costume? They act like how they think those people act. So if you go to a pimp and whore party, how many of you heard of pimp and whore parties? Raise your hands. Now, it just won't be the 40-year-olds. Raise your hands high, okay? And if you dress like a pimp, how do you act? If you go to a south of the border party and dress like that, how do you act at the party? You get where I'm going with this? And if you put this costume on, or a Native American costume, or any other group costume, how do you act during the party? And in the 1940s, and this is an interesting thing about war, and I think most of you have already figured this out, it's a lot easier to kill a Jap than it is to kill an individual. It's a lot easier to kill a crop than an individual. It's a lot easier to kill a nigger than you get the point I'm making? It's a lot easier when you've stripped that person. Because you're not sitting there thinking that man or that woman has dreams. They have hopes, ambitions, worries. They're not even human. I can kill him. You know, when we look at war statistics, we just measure the American side. Have you ever noticed that? Go look in our books. So how many people died in the Vietnam War? Oh, 58,000. What the hell are you talking about? I remember being a little kid, and the announcer used to have North Vietnamese killed, South Vietnamese killed, and Americans killed right over the person's shoulder. And I remember thinking as a kid, how many are there? Because every night, the big number killed would be that. But then when you look in the books, it's like none of them were killed. I sell sports cards, used to sell sports cards. I don't sell them much anymore. The market collapsed. Baseball cards, football cards. And I remember sometime a person came in, and I had $100 on a card. They're like, will you take 50? It's like, no, I'll take 100. It's like, well, what about 52? It's like, dude, we're going to be here a long time, all right? And then we got going. I was like, fine, you can have the card for 80. That's it. He's like, I'm not trying to Jew you down. Hey, now I'm going to lose the sale, and now I got to have this other conversation. Let's do a quick experiment. Raise your hands and don't lie to me, please. I know you just met me, but if I want to be lied to, I'll stay home. All right? So you raise your hands if I ask you a question. How many of you like money? Raise your hands. Okay. How many of you right now, if you had the opportunity to fall in love with a person who had a ton of money and they were going to love you back and let you just love that money, you'd do it? Anybody? Just me? Okay. How many of you worried that you're not going to make enough money? Raise your hands. Okay. This is an art school. Everybody hand go up, okay? What's my point I'm trying to make? We all, unless you're the little girl in that commercial that throws the cereal at the guy, whatever, you love money in this country. All right? So the idea is that this group loves money more. That's crazy. Give you another little thing. I'm trying to get through a lot of stuff quickly, but it's like with Dutch Americans. When people say, she can pay for herself. Let's go what? Dutch. What is that saying of Dutch people? It's saying they're stingy. But when we say Jew you down, that's not stingy. That's what? Greedy. So the idea is that Dutch Americans, the stereotype is they want to keep their own money. Jewish people, they want to keep their money and what? Get yours. Those are stereotypes. You just proved to me that some of you would like my money. Hello? Right? My neighborhood had 7 signs that said, "Take back our country," in September. All right. What does it mean, take? What does that mean? Does that mean what Donald Trump is saying right now when he says, let's have a revolution in the U.S.? Said in public, let's have a revolution in the U.S. We got sedition laws in this country. Okay? Take. What does it mean, back? What does that mean? To February? What does it mean, our? What does that mean, our country? Well, what it doesn't mean for many Americans is for Mexican Americans. You know that costume over there? I bought that in Texas, El Paso, and I spoke at University of Texas, El Paso, and so I brought that out, and I was like, how many of you think this is offensive? It's like, not that many people say. I was like, now I'll ask you, how many of you find that offensive? Anybody? Just me? Okay. Whether I personally think it's offensive or not, it's a good tool for discussion. Now, this game right here, I think most of us would agree that's offensive. We could disagree about whether or not something is racist or not, but I think most people would think that if you have a game where you got points killing people as they cross the border, that's offensive. Hello? And how many of you in here are going to do some kind of video game design? Let me see your hands. All right, I want to see what y'all produce. I want your names, the 3 of you. And every 5 years, check in with me. It's a tough crowd. I want you to speak English. Get on an elevator and people speak in Chinese, Mandarin, speak in Farsi, like, shut up, speak English. What the hell does that mean, speak English? I mean, half of you can't understand what I'm saying since I've been up here. And it's almost like I'm a better American if you get where I'm going? What is obscenity? What is pornography? I believe every object in our museum, or at least the caricature, that they are obscene. I believe these signs are obscene. I believe to summarily dismiss the worth, listen to me, to summarily dismiss the worth of any other person is profanity. I would tell my kids when they were growing up, they'd say shit, and I was like, I don't like that word that much. Even though it's just a sound sign, it has no inherent meaning, and Dad sometimes uses it. I don't really like that word. But I don't hate it if one can hate a word. But I hate it when I'm talking to you and you say so, whatever, because that summarily dismisses me. That's profanity. That's real profanity. And when we do these kinds of signs, that's profanity. And I'll tell you what I say all across this country, and that is this. I know physicists, I know geneticists, I can't say it, but I know them. I know philosophers, I know sociologists, I know psychologists, and not a single one of them knows for sure why people are gay or straight. They have lots of theories, and some of those theories appeal to some of us more than other theories. And I have theologian friends who have theories, but nobody knows. Now, I don't know if you can tell based on the little bit that I've said so far, but the governor of New Jersey and I disagree on quite a few things. Although I have a conservative side of me, he doesn't, we disagree on a lot. But shouldn't it be enough for me to say I disagree with the way he treats teachers in New Jersey? Why would I need to insult his body type for some supposedly clever pun? And my liberal friends who have T-shirts wearing that says Palin is a cunt, that is obscene. That word is no less hateful than the N word or the S word or any of these other words. Why can't it just be sufficient to disagree with the person's ideas and to have the triumph of dialogue? If you learn nothing else here today, and by the way, I'm building a new museum. You know what's in the new museum? Anybody? I'm building a museum about sexism. And it usually takes me about 15 years, so I may not be able to finish it. But I'm building a museum. I already have 500,000 objects. And these objects that were created, and these are, when I say objects, not just images, objects. These are like postcards and trades cards and prints. They had a message, and the message to women was what? Was what? Shut up. And if you learn nothing else from me today, or listen to nothing else from me today, listen to this. Any situation where it requires courage to speak, there is something wrong with the situation, not the speaker. Say it again. Any situation, no exceptions. Any situation where it requires courage to speak, there is something wrong with the situation, not the speaker. Now, does that mean that we don't have situations that require courage to speak? Of course we do. But there's something wrong with that situation. If you're afraid at the workplace, afraid in the class place, afraid in the play place, doesn't matter where it is. If you're afraid to speak, there's something wrong with the situation. And they're being told, be quiet, you don't deserve the vote. Again, some of you are going to be sitting in rooms of advertisers. You're going to be asked to make a decision, either with your tacit approval or with your out-and-out approval. And what I ask is this: be the sane person in the room. You don't have to say, listen, man, dude, you're a bigot and you never should have been born. Don't go at him that way. Just say, what does that mean? Take them back to the visual thinking strategies, which is, Fred, when you look at this, what do you see? What is it you see? What else do you see? Now, they may never see what you see, but you got to look at that more than once. And so in our culture, and by the way, this is an image that, but remember I told you that for years I would see stuff and not buy it because I wasn't collecting that? I saw this image on this spy thing on a T-shirt in New Orleans, and it's New Orleans, not New Orleans, New Orleans, and it's Baton Rouge, in New Orleans years and years ago, but I didn't buy it. But you know, the thing about hatred is it keeps coming back. The message there is this: if you are a strong woman, if you are a person who has strong convictions and you are a woman, you're actually not a what? Say it. A woman. You're really a man. And that's reminiscent of when ambitious blacks used to be told they were trying to act what? White. Let's go back to the point I made earlier. Isn't it okay to just disagree with someone's policies? Hello? Now, I know that most of you have never seen a sex doll. But if you know anything about sex dolls, I'm talking about the actual, what do they make those out of? Thank you, Max. If you've seen those latex dolls, Max saw them in a movie. If you've seen a mainstream movie, that is what they have done there is taken the latex doll and made her human. The mouth, the eyes, the face, the everything. Okay? Now here's the kicker. That was not written by that was not created by some extremist group, unless you consider Burger King an extremist group. And that right there, and it's called the Burger King Super 7-incher, This was a national ad. People sat in a room for months as part of a national campaign, and that's what they came up with. Be in that room, but be sane. Have some conviction when you're in a room. It does us no good. Some of my liberal progressive friends, they just don't want to be in the room. They think that they've won. Oh, I didn't sully my soul. Doesn't do us as a culture any good most of the time to not have sane people also in the room. One of the few groups in our society where we use the word trash, trailer trash, white trash, poor white trash, and it's really weird. How much time do I have? 20 minutes, good, all right, I'm going fast, all right. I'll give you a quick parallel. We do with poor whites what we often do with minorities. Here's an example. Take Native Americans. There is this diametrically opposed portrayal of Native Americans. On the one hand, the proud, brave savage, the beautiful princess. You know what I mean? The Pocahontas and the braves who fought the oppressive government. And you go to a gun show and there's just these beautiful, idyllic, you know what I mean, romanticized images of Native Americans. And then there's the drunken savage image and the Jezebel, whore, hypersexual buck image, male and female. There's the savage who's, trying to scalp people, that whole thing, which is, read the history books. That's all been flipped. The same thing we do with poor whites. Because on the one hand, you have, in a society that values Christianity, and let's say this, values Christianity more than it does other religions, there are poor whites portrayed like the Waltons, very religious, very moral, hardworking, patriotic, don't know when to stop saying goodnight. So there's that whole group over there. And then you have like the poor whites is people from the movie Deliverance. Just bloodthirsty, cultural, parasitic trash that will rape you, will hurt you, will brutal. It's like this weird schizophrenia. We do that with minorities all the time. All the time. You're not qualified. Oh, you are qualified? Then damn it, you're stuck on yourself. You're arrogant. We do that all the time. So, again, from that letter, if you want to address social justice, don't do it whispering. Don't do it in a whisper. Do it in a shout. Do it directly. And Martin Luther King, this is kind of, because he was such a prim guy in some ways, to use a metaphor about a boil and pus and lancing it and letting the pus fall, that's an ugly metaphor, but it's an apt one. Because the idea there is that if you really want to deal with sexism or homophobia or classism or any number of other anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, whatever your thing is that you want to fight, you got to deal with it directly. And you got to lance it. Now, I don't know how many of you remember H. Ross Perot. Anybody remember H. Ross Perot, the billionaire? He and I don't agree on a ton, but we agree on this statement. The activist is not, I wouldn't have said man, I just said person, but the activist is not the man who says the river is dirty. The activist is the man who does what? Say it. Cleans the river. And what that means is, and like I've had people say to me, I don't like the way you fight racism. It's too direct, it's too confrontational, it's too whatever else. But I'm in the river. And they're standing on the damn shore dry. Get your ass in the river if you want to criticize how people clean in the river. If you don't like the way people are fighting for poor people, then you do something. If you don't like the way they're doing this or the way they're doing that, get wet. Get in there and clean the river. And by cleaning the river, I don't mean flying somebody in here where they can tell you the river's dirty, then they get paid and go back home. We know the river is dirty. So I want to talk to you real quick about a couple, 3 things. This is like 2 minutes apiece. Erin Davies, she woke up one day and someone had written, "You are a fag" on her car because she's lesbian. And she got upset and started driving her car around. And now this is not that car because she eventually changed the car. But can you imagine that? She was like, you know what, someone wrote it on my car, I'm going to let everybody see it. She go to the grocery store. People just looking at her car. And she took off across the country. She has a document. How many of you heard of fag bug? Okay, good. A couple people in the back. She just took off across the country. And it gave her an opportunity to do what we do in the museum. Let's talk about it. Words have no inherent meaning, but we give them meanings, and often the meanings we give them hurt. So we brought her to fairs. By the time we brought her to fairs, she'd redone her car. But she had a chance to talk about how she fought against hate speech. And what was interesting was, I had a problem at first bringing her to fairs because I don't like the word fag. And it was going to put fag bug out there in front of everybody. The documentary, the car, we set the car right in the middle of the campus. We were going to have everybody screaming, hey, there's the fag bug and stuff. And I was like, ah. And someone said to me, you have a whole section of the museum that deals with the word nigger. And I thought, well, that's true. But I hate that too. And it's inside. So anyway, we brought it. We had great discussions. That's her way. Now, you may not like the way she's fighting hate speech, but she's doing something. Up at Ferris, up on the Big Rapids campus, one of the things we did was we built a wall. I mean, we literally built it, and which was cool because we got construction management students, we got physical plant, we got public safety, student affairs, housing, my office, academic affairs, and it scared the daylights out of most administrators. Because you know how y'all administrators are. Controversy, and you start running the other way, right? And we built this wall and put every nasty, mean-spirited word on there. And we left that wall up, I think, for a week. And we had someone with that wall 24 hours a day. I did say 24 hours a day. And people would come out there, and it would give us opportunities to talk about hate speech. And would also give us an opportunity to say to them, although it's just symbolic, symbols matter. And on such and such a day, I want you to come by here, and I'm going to give you a hammer. And I want you to be a part of tearing this wall down. It's just symbolic, but symbols matter. And so we had the big day. And then, well, I wish you could see how big it was. It was a big wall. I mean, it was, I don't know, maybe the size of this thing right here, the screen. And for us to, maybe it was bigger than that. And it was both sides. And you know what was cool? To see young people and old people and students and faculty and others taking big hammers. And now, maybe they left there and went call somebody a bad word. I don't know. But I know for one moment in time, that sounds like a song. For one moment in time, one small group of people were on the same page about those words. And then the last thing, and I don't know why I didn't, I think this was at Ohio University, and why we did not do this up at Ferris, because we own the actual things they're showing. We could have partnered with students here, and we could have created this campaign, but that's okay. The main thing is someone did it. And what they did, created a nice campaign that went viral. And all it said was, here's an image. Here's a person. I'm not that. Okay? And believe it or not, I just got through that whole presentation. So do we have a couple minutes for questions or something, or are we good? I don't want that up there. Anybody? Any questions or comments? Well, thank you so much for coming. Yeah.